It began on a quiet night in a forgotten corner of Earth, where the stars looked like distant embers and the air carried the stillness of a world tired of its own noise. Daniel Carter sat alone in his small cabin, his body aching from years of labor, his mind lost in the endless weight of loneliness. He was a mechanic by trade, a soldier by history, and a man by the simplest measure of endurance, the kind who fixed things for others but never himself. He closed his eyes that night thinking only of sleep, unaware that he would never wake up on Earth again. For beyond the veil of his dreams, something ancient and waiting stirred in the fabric of the galaxy. And as he drifted into darkness, a light brighter than any star swept across his room, dissolving everything he knew. When Daniel opened his eyes, he wasn't in his bed but on a surface that glowed like glass. Beneath him ran veins of golden light that pulsed softly. The air smelled of ozone and lilies, and a sky of silver clouds stretched beyond a vast crystalline dome. Around him stood beings. Tall, slender, their skin a faint shimmer of violet and gold, their eyes radiant like twin moons. They spoke softly in a language that felt like music, and yet he understood none of it. Panic rose in his chest, until one of them approached. A woman unlike any he had ever seen. Her presence alone felt like gravity. Her skin glowed faintly like sunlit bronze. Her hair floated as if underwater, and her eyes, deep and luminous, seemed to hold centuries of power. She spoke in perfect English, her voice calm and commanding. "Welcome, human, to the hall of the Empress," she said, and Daniel's breath froze. The chamber grew silent as she stepped closer, the other aliens bowing their heads in reverence. She regarded him not with curiosity but with familiarity, as if she had been waiting for him. "You were chosen," she said, "by the bond of the celestial line, sealed across stars and time." Daniel could barely speak. His voice cracked as he stammered. "There's been a mistake. I'm just a man from Earth." But the Empress smiled faintly. "You call it Earth, we call it Solthera, cradle of the first flames?" She raised a hand, and a beam of light touched his forehead. In an instant, images flooded his mind. Vast fleets of alien ships, wars fought in the void, and a single human figure standing beside her, commanding an army that once united galaxies. "You are his echo?" she whispered. "The soul reborn?" Daniel stumbled back, shaking, his heart pounding, because in that moment, he saw his own face among those visions, standing beside her in a time that couldn't exist. The following days blurred into ritual and revelation. They clothed him in silken robes that moved like smoke. They brought him to temples where stars were worshipped as living gods, and everywhere he went, whispers followed. The chosen mate, the reborn guardian, the one who would awaken the Empress's dormant power. At night he tried to escape, wandering the glass corridors that curved endlessly through the palace, but every path led back to her throne, where she waited, silent and patient, watching him as though studying the past through a living memory. The Galactic Council soon arrived, tall delegates of alien races draped in jeweled armor. They came to witness this strange human who had appeared from nowhere. One sneered and said, "He is weak, Empress. His kind are extinct beyond their cradle." But before Daniel could speak, the floor shook with a low hum, and the golden veins beneath his feet flared. The same symbols that had haunted his dreams appeared in the air. The council froze as the palace responded to him, walls pulsing with life, air trembling with energy. "He awakens the ancient code," whispered one alien priest, and the Empress rose from her seat, her gaze unwavering. "Humanity," she said softly, "was never extinct, merely forgotten." Daniel felt something burning inside his chest, a resonance, a pulse like a heartbeat not his own. Memories that weren't memories flashed, battlefields among stars, ships breaking through nebulous storms, the sound of voices crying his name, and then silence. He turned to her, trembling. "What am I?" he asked, and she answered. "The one who bound himself to me before the fall of empires, the last human emperor of the First Alliance." He couldn't believe it, but the evidence was in his blood, for when he touched the ground again, the palace bent its light around him like a living halo. News spread across the stars faster than light. The human returned, the Empress's chosen mate, and with it came both worship and war. Rival factions rose to challenge her, claiming she had broken the ancient codes by bonding with an extinct race. Fleets surrounded her world, demanding she surrender the human to their custody. Daniel watched from the observation deck as armadas filled the void. Millions of ships aligned in silence. He turned to her, fear and defiance mixing in his eyes. "You're risking everything for me?" he said, but she shook her head. "No, Daniel. It is you who risked everything for us once." She placed her hand over his, and suddenly the stars outside seemed to bend. The ancient war engines hidden beneath her palace began to awaken, powered not by fuel but by something deeper, the resonance between their souls. "You once swore to protect this galaxy," she whispered. "Now you will again." The first strike came without warning, a massive shockwave that tore through space. Enemy fleets advancing, lasers streaking across the darkness. Daniel felt the vibration in his bones as the palace transformed. Walls opening, towers unfolding into colossal cannons. The Empress stood beside him in radiant armor, her voice echoing through every channel. "By decree of the celestial line, humanity stands again." And Daniel, guided by the instinct buried deep within, reached for the control orb. The room filled with symbols only he could understand. His hands moved on their own. The palace's defenses roared to life, beams of light tearing through enemy formations, ships collapsing into silence. It wasn't war. It was retribution. An ancient promise reawakened. When the smoke cleared, half the enemy armada was gone. The rest fled, leaving only the stars and the breathless silence of victory. When the light faded, Daniel turned to her, exhaustion written in every line of his face. "It's over," he whispered, but she shook her head gently. "It has only begun." And as the great palace slowly descended into calm, the council bowed before him, their arrogance replaced with awe. "The human bloodline endures," one murmured. "And with it our salvation?" Daniel looked out at the stars, his reflection in the glass showing not the mechanic he once was but something older, stronger, and eternal. The Empress stepped beside him, her voice soft as dawn. "You closed your eyes to escape your world," she said, "and opened them to save another." His lips curved into a faint smile. "Then let's make this one worth it." Together they stood, the galaxy around them reborn under the light of two intertwined destinies. One human, one divine, both unyielding. And as the music of the stars returned to silence, a single transmission echoed across the Galactic Council's networks. "Humanity has awakened. The galaxy will never sleep again." If you enjoyed this HFY sci-fi story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more tales of humanity's courage, power, and heart among the stars. Stay tuned for the next story in the Sci-Fi Vault, where every star hides a secret, and every secret changes the universe. When Daniel awoke again, the stars had shifted, and time itself seemed to hum differently around him. The Empress's world was not bound by day or night. Its skies shimmered with auroras that never faded, and its oceans glowed from within like living constellations. For days, he wandered the halls of her palace, an endless labyrinth of crystal and light, watched by servants who bowed yet never spoke. Every meal was silent, every gaze reverent, and yet he felt the quiet weight of expectation pressing on his chest. Each night he lay beneath ceilings that reflected galaxies, trying to remember the smell of Earth's rain, the sound of his old clock ticking. But even those memories were fading, like dust swept away by time's tide. One evening, the Empress summoned him again, her throne room alive with shifting energy. She looked at him not as a stranger now but as something she was waiting to recognize. "You've begun to remember, haven't you?" she asked softly, her eyes reflecting a thousand stars. Daniel's voice broke. "I see flashes, wars, faces, fire, but they can't be mine." Her answer was a whisper. "They are your soul's echoes. Humanity remembers even when it forgets." That night, she took him beyond the palace walls, into the heart of her empire, where titanic machines floated like mountains across the void, engines that drew power from dying stars. She showed him cities suspended in the upper atmosphere, gardens grown from crystal, and at the center, a monument taller than clouds, engraved with words he couldn't read but somehow understood. To the human who stood with the Empress when all others fled. He touched the writing with trembling fingers. "That was you?" she said quietly. "Your kind fled into darkness when the wars came, But you stayed. You died protecting the core of this galaxy. And I vowed that when your soul returned, I would find you again. Daniel's throat tightened. He wanted to deny it, to say it was madness, but deep within, he felt a stirring, a warmth beneath his skin, like something ancient trying to awaken. As they stood together before the monument, the skies darkened, and from beyond the horizon came the sound of thunder not born of storms but of engines, fleets emerging from the shadows. Her guards ran to the walls, voices filled with alarm. The Vorn ascendancy has breached the veil. One shouted. Daniel looked to the Empress. They're coming for me, aren't they? Her silence was answer enough. They fear what you represent, she finally said. The return of humanity means the end of their dominion. He turned toward the glow of distant fire. Then let me fight, he said, surprising himself. I don't know who I was, but I remember what it feels like to stand my ground. She smiled, faintly sadly. You will, Daniel Carter of Earth, you will remember everything soon enough. As she raised her hand, the sigil on his chest burned with light, armor forming around him like living metal, fitting perfectly, as though molded by destiny itself. In the following hours, the Empress's world became a fortress, her fleets assembling in disciplined silence. The Galactic Council tried to intervene, their transmissions filled with panic, demanding she surrender the human to avoid galactic war. Humanity's return is a violation of the ancient pacts, they cried. Earth was sealed by decree. But the Empress silenced them with a single message, her voice calm yet unyielding. You sealed them because you feared them, and now that fear has come. Full circle, Daniel watched as the stars filled with armadas, millions of ships spreading like wings across the void. His heart pounded. The air hummed with ancient energy. He felt connected. To the Empress, to the machines, to something vast and old. Her voice reached him through the bond they now shared. Do you trust me? I don't know, he said honestly. But I'll stand with you. Then stand tall, she whispered. For when humanity stands, galaxies tremble. When the enemy fleets opened fire, the void erupted into chaos. Beams of energy cut through the sky, tearing through layers of defense. Daniel braced himself as shockwaves rippled across the planet. But instead of fear, he felt focus, calm, the strange certainty of purpose. His hands moved on the control panel before him, and ships, ancient Terran ships hidden for millennia, rose from the oceans, black as midnight, bearing the crest of Earth's first fleet. Impossible, one alien commander gasped. Across the comms, those were destroyed in the First War. But Daniel only whispered, we never stopped building. The Empress looked at him, her expression unreadable. Now do you see why they feared your kind? She said, as the Terran fleet opened fire, tearing through the enemy armadas with precision and power unseen for centuries. Each blast felt like history returning, vengeance wrapped in light. As the battle raged, Daniel's memories returned piece by piece. Not as visions, but as truths etched in his soul. He remembered standing beside her thousands of years ago, leading humanity's last stand against the darkness. He remembered dying in her arms, promising to return. And now that promise was fulfilled. When the last enemy ship fell, silence returned to the stars. The Empress turned toward him, tears glimmering like jewels in her eyes. You found your way back, she said, and Daniel, still trembling from the weight of it all, simply nodded. Maybe I never really left, he whispered. The palace lights dimmed, and somewhere in the distance, the first dawn of a reborn galaxy began to rise. Humanity had awakened once more, and its echo would be eternal. The morning after the battle, the Empress's palace floated above the clouds like a wounded god, its crystal towers cracked but still glowing with life. Smoke curled through the horizon where the last of the enemy wreckage burned. Daniel stood on the observation deck, staring at the void that only hours ago had been filled with fire. The armor he wore had fused with his skin, its veins still pulsing faintly with golden light, and though the silence was peaceful, it carried a strange sadness. Reminder of what victory costs, he remembered the screams that weren't human, the faces of enemies who feared him before they died, and for the first time since he awoke on this world, he felt something more than confusion or awe. He felt guilt. They called me a savior, he murmured. But all I did was destroy. The Empress appeared beside him, her presence like soft light breaking through shadow. Salvation and destruction often share the same hand, she said. But your heart chose one over the other. Still, her tone carried something unspoken, something she feared to tell him. That night, the Galactic Council sent envoys, their ships arriving under flags of truce, towering beings with eyes like glass and voices that rang like bells. They entered her hall with arrogance veiled in politeness. We come in peace, they said. But the return of humanity destabilizes the balance. The ancient treaty forbids their resurgence. Daniel watched from behind her throne, invisible to most. You fear one man so much? The Empress asked, her gaze sharp as a blade. Not the man. One alien answered coldly. The idea of humanity, their defiance spreads faster than war. Daniel stepped forward, his voice calm but edged with steel. If your balance depends on keeping others in chains, then it deserves to fall. Silence filled the chamber, and one of the envoys hissed. You speak as if you are a god. Daniel looked at him steadily. No, just human. The word hung in the air like thunder, ancient and heavy. The council withdrew, shaken. But the Empress's eyes held worry, for she knew their retreat was not peace, it was planning. In the following days, Daniel found himself wandering through the archives of the palace, endless chambers filled with holographic memories of 1,000 worlds, each one showing fragments of humanity's lost past. He watched images of old Terran fleets, children laughing beneath alien suns, soldiers standing shoulder to shoulder with species now extinct. He felt their pride, their hope, and their sorrow, and for the first time, he understood what the Empress meant when she said humanity was never gone. It lived in echoes, in alliances, in legends whispered to frighten empires, and now he was the echo made flesh. One night, he stumbled upon a locked chamber deep beneath the palace, guarded by statues that looked almost human. When he touched the door, it opened on its own. Inside floated a stasis crystal, and within it, a body that looked exactly like his, older, scarred, dressed in armor black as midnight. He staggered back, heart racing, as the voice of the Empress filled the chamber. That was you, Daniel, she said from behind him. Your first self, the man who gave me the stars and his life in the same breath. He turned, shaking. You kept my body? I kept your promise, she replied, her voice breaking. The council would have destroyed your memory if they knew, so I hid you, waiting for your soul's return, because I knew humanity could not end with death. Daniel stared at his reflection in the crystal, and something inside him shifted, the guilt, the confusion, even the fear. It began to fade, replaced by something ancient and certain. Then we finish what he started, he said quietly. We rebuild what they feared. She smiled sadly. And they will come again to stop you. Then let them, he said. Humanity doesn't hide. As he spoke, the crystal behind him shattered into light, the energy from it flowing into his armor, binding the past and present into one. Weeks passed, and the galaxy began to stir with unease. Rebel factions rose in support of the Empress and the human, calling themselves the Children of Soul. Their fleets painted with the blue and white of old Earth, entire star systems began declaring independence from the Council, whispering, the Empress's mate has returned, and with him, the fire of the first dawn. Propaganda, stories, myths, all spreading faster than control. The Council responded with blockades, censorship, and fear. But truth had already escaped their grasp. Humanity's rebirth had become an idea, and no empire could kill an idea. One night, as Daniel looked upon the stars, he asked her softly, Why me? Out of all the souls that ever lived? She turned toward him, her face unreadable. Because only humanity believes in impossible things, she said, and the galaxy has forgotten how. Then came the omen, the one that changed everything. Scouts returned from the outer rim with recordings. Something massive was approaching, a fleet darker than space itself. The markings were not of the Council, nor of any known empire. They come from beyond the veil, said the Admiral. The same place the First War began. Daniel watched the image, a storm of black ships, consuming stars as they moved, and he felt the echo of an ancient terror stir within him. The architects, The Empress whispered, her voice trembling. The ones who built the first war. The ones even we feared. The galaxy that had mocked humanity now looked to its last sun for hope, and Daniel realized the cruel symmetry of fate. He had awoken in a world where he didn't belong, only to become the one thing it needed most. A reminder that when darkness falls, humanity doesn't kneel. It stands, even against gods. The Empress turned to him, her hand finding his. They will come for everything we've rebuilt, she said. And you will have to decide. Save this galaxy, or avenge the one you lost. Daniel looked out into the stars where the black fleet grew closer, his reflection flickering in the window like a ghost of two lives merged into one. Then it's time humanity showed them what waking a human truly means, he whispered, as the palace lights dimmed and the drums of war began again in the distance. Not of fear, but of defiance. The drums of war echoed through the void like thunder trapped between stars. Entire systems lit up with alarm codes as the architect's fleet crossed into the known sectors. Their ships were nothing like the Council's or even the Empress's armadas. They moved like shadows, their surfaces bending light, devouring signals, leaving behind silence instead of wreckage. It was said the architects were not conquerors but harvesters, that they built galaxies and tore them apart when they grew tired. And now they had returned to finish what they started. Daniel stood before the central command sphere, watching projections of collapsing worlds. He felt the same cold dread he had known as a soldier on Earth, the helplessness before an overwhelming enemy. The Empress's commanders waited for his orders, some doubting him quietly, others already loyal to the legend he had become. They don't come to conquer, Daniel said softly. They come to erase. The Empress stepped beside him, her armor gleaming like molten gold. Then we make them remember what humanity became when cornered, she replied. The last species that fought extinction and won. Preparations began, the galaxy moving under one banner for the first time in millennia. The Empress's voice echoed across systems, her message simple and absolute. Humanity stands again, and with it, the right to exist. Old enemies sent fleets under truce, neutral worlds offered resources. Even the Galactic Council, terrified, sent envoys to beg for alliance. But Daniel knew fear was not unity. It was desperation, and desperation alone couldn't win a war like this. He gathered the ancient Terran ships that had risen from the oceans, merging them with the Empress's technology. Human design fused with alien grace, creating vessels unlike any ever seen before. Ships that moved as if alive, powered by the same resonance that linked him and the Empress. She called them the Echo Fleet, named after what he had once been, an echo of humanity, now reborn as its voice. As the fleets assembled, Daniel walked among the soldiers. Many were not human, but all looked at him as if he were something beyond mortal. He hated it. He wanted to be a man, not a myth. One soldier, a young alien with translucent skin, looked up at him and said, "They say your people once burned the sky to save their world. Is that true?" Daniel hesitated before answering. "We burned everything we had to keep one light alive." The soldier nodded. "Then maybe that's what we need now." In that moment, Daniel understood that what the galaxy needed wasn't an emperor. It needed belief, belief that courage still meant something, that hope could still burn bright enough to be seen from 1,000 light years away. Then came the night before the war. The Empress found him alone on the balcony of her palace. The stars were quiet, and for once, the galaxy seemed to hold its breath. "You're afraid," she said softly, her voice neither judging nor pitying. "I've seen extinction before," he replied. "I know what it costs." She placed her hand on his chest where the glowing sigil pulsed faintly. "This bond we share was never meant to save one world, Daniel. It was meant to save many." He turned to her, his voice low. "And if we fail?" She smiled, the kind of smile that hides heartbreak. "Then humanity dies fighting as it lived, defiant." He looked at her, and for the first time, he saw not a goddess, not a ruler, but a woman burdened by centuries of promises. "If we survive this," he whispered, "what happens to us?" She didn't answer. She only pressed her forehead against his and said, "If the stars still shine after this war, we'll find out." When dawn came, there was no sunrise, only the light of thousands of ships igniting their drives, the largest gathering of war power in recorded history. The Empress and Daniel stood at the front aboard the flagship Soul's Wrath, its hull etched with words from ancient Earth. Ad astra per aspera, to the stars through hardship. The fleets formed a wall of light across the edge of the void, waiting for the black storm to arrive, and then it did. The Architect's fleet poured out of hyperspace like a tidal wave, devouring light, distorting gravity. Their ships alive and wrong, shaped like creatures that shouldn't exist. All vessels, defensive formation. The Admiral shouted, but Daniel didn't hear him. His vision blurred as the sigil on his chest burned, connecting him again to the palace, the Empress, the fleet. Everything, voices filled his mind, human and alien alike. We stand together. For Soul, for the Empress, for life. The first impact came as space itself seemed to crack, beams of black energy slicing through entire squadrons, ships vanishing into nothingness. Daniel gripped the command sphere, his blood glowing through his veins. Target the core distortions, he shouted. They feed on power, starve them. And for the first time, the fleet began to adapt, human instinct guiding alien precision, strategy turning chaos into rhythm. Each command from him echoed through thousands of ships like a heartbeat. The Empress's voice joined his across the channels, her tone calm, divine. Remember what you are fighting for, she said. Not for victory, but for tomorrow. As the enemy closed in, Daniel's mind filled with memories not his own, the first war, the first fall, and the promise that had followed. Humanity will rise again, and when it does, the stars will tremble. The battle raged for hours, time losing meaning, light and darkness clashing until the void itself seemed to bleed color. Entire fleets were consumed, worlds burned. But humanity's fire never faltered. The Echo fleet broke through the center lines, carving a path toward the enemy's core. Daniel's body shook, his armor cracked, blood dripping like molten gold. We can't hold much longer, the Admiral cried, but Daniel's eyes burned with a fury older than time. Then we don't hold, we strike, he roared, and the Soul's Wrath surged forward, straight into the heart of the enemy swarm. The Empress beside him, her hand gripping his. Together, she said, and in that instant, their bond ignited fully, their power merging, light pouring from the flagship in a storm that shattered the dark. A flare so bright it blinded the stars. When the light faded, silence followed, only wreckage remained drifting through the void, and in the center of it, the Soul's Wrath, burning, breaking apart. Daniel, barely conscious, looked at the Empress through the smoke, her face bloodied, but her eyes still steady. We did it, he whispered. Not yet, she breathed, pointing toward the horizon, where one final ship, massive, pulsing with darkness, approached slowly. That's their true core, she said weakly. The mind behind the swarm. Daniel staggered to his feet, his voice hoarse. Then we finish it. The human fleet gathered what remained. The Empress reached for him, her strength fading. If you fall now, humanity's fire dies again. He looked back at her and smiled faintly. Then I'll make sure it burns forever. He turned toward the light and vanished into the storm, alone. Space itself seemed to shudder as Daniel's ship broke formation, its engines flaring bright against the endless dark, the remains of the Echo fleet trailing in the distance like dying stars. Before him loomed the Architect's final vessel, a colossal construct so vast it eclipsed the light of nearby suns, its hull alive with moving veins of shadow, its surface bending reality as if rejecting existence itself. This was not a ship. It was something older, something that had seen galaxies born and die. Daniel could feel its pull inside his skull, a whisper that wasn't sound but memory. We made you, it said, and now we will unmake you. His hands trembled over the controls, yet his eyes were steady. You made nothing, he whispered back. Humanity made itself. And with that, he pushed the throttle forward, the Soul's Wrath roaring through the debris like a wounded beast refusing to fall, its hull cracking, its energy reserves nearly gone, but its will, his will, unchanged. Inside the palace, the Empress watched through the neural link, her face pale, the connection between them flickering like a dying flame. She could feel every heartbeat, every shiver of pain he endured. Daniel, come back, she pleaded through the comms, her voice trembling for the first time. You can't face it alone. But his voice came through, calm and quiet. I'm not alone. You're with me. You always were. And for a moment, her tears fell silently. The galaxy's mightiest ruler reduced to a woman watching the man she loved drift toward oblivion. Around her, the council and commanders begged her to order retreat, to abandon the fight, but she stood tall. No, she said. We don't retreat from the end of creation. And her words rippled through every surviving ship, reigniting their courage. Fleets that had scattered began to turn back, one by one, drawn not by orders but by faith. Daniel breached the outer layer of the architect's ship, the hull opening like a wound to consume him. Alarms blared, lights flickered, and for a second reality fractured. His sensors flooded with impossible readings. He saw stars reversing their birth, galaxies spiraling backward into nothing, voices of extinct species crying through time. This thing, he whispered, it's feeding on history. The deeper he went, the more distorted everything became, until his instruments went dark, leaving only silence and a faint blue glow ahead. He stepped from his ship, his armor now fully fused to his skin, every movement echoing through the void as if the stars themselves listened. The corridor before him stretched into infinity, filled with holograms of humanity's past. Children playing, soldiers dying, lovers embracing under alien skies. All the lives that had built what he was now fighting for. He walked through them slowly, every face a reminder that humanity was more than war. It was memory, it was defiance. At the end of the corridor stood the architect, a shape both infinite and intimate, its form shifting between human and machine, between creation and corruption. You were meant to serve? It said in a voice that carried across time. Humanity was our experiment, our flame to light the dark, but you burned too bright. Daniel's jaw clenched. You created life to control it. We made meaning from the chaos you left. The being tilted its head. Meaning? It repeated. Your meaning is pain. Daniel's hand tightened around his weapon, light gathering in his palm. Pain is what made us human, he said. And that's why you'll never understand us. The architect moved, faster than sight, striking with a force that shattered the ground. Daniel flew back, armor fracturing, lungs burning. But he rose again, bleeding golden light, his eyes like twin suns. I died once for this galaxy. He growled. I'll do it again. The architect raised its hand, the universe itself bending, but Daniel leapt forward, his weapon plunging through its chest, light exploding outward. On the palace bridge, the Empress gasped as the stars around her began to flicker, the black fleet folding in on itself, the darkness unraveling. She felt his heartbeat once more through the bond, weak, fading, but still there. Daniel, she cried, but he couldn't answer. The architect's voice screamed through the collapsing void. You cannot destroy what built you. Daniel's voice whispered back. Watch me. He pressed the final activation on his armor, the symbol on his chest blazing brighter than a sun. Energy cascading through every system, overloading both him and the architect. For humanity, he said softly, as the explosion ripped through time itself. From every world, from every fleet, beings looked up as the night sky ignited. A brilliant wave of white and blue sweeping across the galaxy, wiping out the darkness but leaving life untouched. It was as if a human heartbeat echoed through the stars, steady and eternal. When the light faded, silence fell again. The black fleets were gone, the void clear, the war over. The Empress stood on the balcony of her shattered palace, her hands trembling as she felt the bond between them break. Not in pain, but in peace, she fell to her knees, tears glinting like glass as she whispered. He kept his promise. Behind her, the council knelt in silence, and for the first time in history, the galaxy mourned a human. Weeks passed. The Empress rebuilt what remained. Her armies now called the Terran Accord, an alliance of every surviving world. Their symbol, the mark of the soul's wrath, became the new flag of unity. Under her leadership, they restored broken systems, freed enslaved worlds, and carried Daniel's name like a sacred vow. Statues were raised across planets, stories spread faster than light, of the human who defied the gods, who gave the galaxy a second dawn. One night, As she stood alone in the temple of light, she looked up at the stars and whispered, "You closed your eyes on Earth, Daniel, but you opened them here, and the galaxy never stopped watching." Far beyond the known edge, in the quiet space between realities, a flicker of light stirred among the wreckage of the architect's core. A spark that refused to die, and somewhere in that light, a heartbeat began again, slow, human, and unyielding. The stars burned quietly above the ruins of war, their light soft against the wounds left behind. The galaxy was healing, but the silence that followed victory felt heavier than any battle cry. Months had passed since the final explosion, since the architect fleet dissolved into light. Yet every night, the Empress found herself listening to the void, waiting for a voice she knew she would never hear again. She ruled from her golden throne as the galaxy hailed her as the savior of creation. But, behind the praise, behind the crowds and ceremonies, she carried a grief too deep for words. Every dawn she would walk to the balcony of her palace and whisper his name, hoping the stars still carried its echo. Daniel. The sound of it steadied her heart and broke it all at once. She would remember the warmth of his voice, the human stubbornness in his eyes, the promise that even death would not silence him, and she would whisper softly, "You kept your word, my human." But destiny has strange ways of keeping promises. One evening, as she oversaw the reconstruction of a devastated colony, a signal reached the command bridge, faint, irregular, but impossibly familiar. The technician stammered, "It's a distress beacon, old Terran frequency, sir." "No, your majesty." She froze, her heart stopped for a breath. "Impossible," she whispered. "All Terran beacons were lost in the war, but when they triangulated the source, it came from beyond the galactic rim. In the region where Daniel's last battle had taken place, the command room filled with murmurs. "It could be debris," one officer said, but she knew better. "Set a course," she ordered, her eyes burning with determination. "I will see for myself." Her advisors protested, warning her of the dangers, but no one could stop her. She had faced extinction. What was fear compared to hope? The Empress boarded her personal vessel, the Eternal Dawn, a ship built with both Terran and Imperial design, sleek and silent, a symbol of the bond between their worlds. As the engines roared to life, she stood at the viewport, watching her planet shrink into the distance. The stars stretched into streaks of silver as they entered hyperspace. And for the first time in ages, she allowed herself to dream. She remembered the night Daniel had told her, "If I die, don't wait. Build something worth dying for." But she had waited anyway, not out of weakness, but because she couldn't believe a soul like his could vanish completely. Humanity had been born from defiance, and Daniel Carter had been its last heartbeat. She whispered to herself, "If there is even one chance, I will find you." After days of travel, the ship emerged into a dead sector, the void darker than normal space. As if light itself feared to linger there, wreckage drifted endlessly. Broken ships, shattered moons, pieces of forgotten battles. "This is where he fell," she murmured, her voice barely more than breath. They followed the beacon deeper into the debris field until the scanners picked up something massive, half buried in the husk of the architect's core. The remains of the Soul's Wrath, its hull torn open, its engines silent, but deep within its ruins, the signal pulsed, faint but steady. She felt her heart race. "Bring us closer," she ordered, descending with her guard into the wreckage. The halls were silent, the walls scorched, fragments of Terran symbols flickering faintly on the steel. She walked slowly, her hand tracing the surface. "You really did it," she whispered to the ghosts. Then she saw it. A stasis chamber, cracked but still active, floating in the ship's core room. Inside it was a faint light, and within that light, a shadow that looked unmistakably human. Her breath caught. "Daniel?" she whispered, falling to her knees beside the pod, her hands trembling as she brushed away the frost. His face was there, peaceful, eyes closed, like he had just fallen asleep. The technician scanned it quickly. "Vital readings, faint but present," one said in disbelief. "My lady, he's alive?" She closed her eyes, tears spilling freely. "No," she said softly. "He never died." She reached out and pressed her palm to the glass. The bond between them flickered weakly. The same warmth she had thought lost forever brushed against her mind. A whisper, faint but real. "You found me." They brought the chamber back aboard the Eternal Dawn, its systems humming as life slowly returned to him. It took hours, maybe days. Time no longer mattered. She never left his side, her hand always resting over his, until at last, his eyes opened, groggy and disoriented, but alive. "You kept your promise?" he murmured, his voice broken but real. She laughed through tears. "You always were terrible at goodbyes." He smiled weakly. "Guess humanity doesn't know how to quit." She helped him sit, her gaze full of both fury and love. "You destroyed gods, Daniel Carter, and you still find a way to come back late." "I told you," he whispered. "We don't retreat." And she kissed his forehead, whispering back, "Welcome home, human." When news of his survival spread, the galaxy erupted in celebration. Fleets fired light into the heavens, worlds rang bells, and children born after the war grew up learning his name. The Empress and Daniel rebuilt together. Not as ruler and soldier, but as equals, they created the Soul Accord, a new era where no world would be silenced, where unity was forged not through fear but through choice, and wherever he walked, people bowed not because he was legend, but because he was proof that humanity could die 1,000 times and still return to light. In the years that followed, their bond became the living heart of the new age. She ruled beside him, and he taught them what it meant to fight not for power, but for purpose. And on quiet nights, when the stars glowed soft and calm, the Empress would lean on his shoulder, and he'd whisper with a smile, "You know, I only closed my eyes for a moment." She'd smile back, "And woke up where you belonged." The camera would pull back across the galaxy, peaceful, alive, rebuilt, and in the endless distance, the narrator's voice would echo softly. He closed his eyes on Earth and opened them beside the Empress. But in truth, he never left humanity behind. He became its light forever. Thank you for watching this HFY Sci-Fi story. If it touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more cinematic tales of humanity, courage, and destiny among the stars. Because the story of humanity is never over. It's only waiting to be remembered.